The views and opinions expressed on any program are those of the producers and/or the persons appearing on the program, and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of FRC Media, Bristol Community College, or the City of Fall River.
Well, welcome to Spindle City Straight Talk. I'm Chip.
And I'm CJ.
And it's a Wednesday.
It's a Wednesday.
And we got a lot of things to talk about today.
Yes, we do. Let's quickly talk about something we brought up briefly at our last show, and that was about the Lynnway deal, where the governor and the federal government are all going to toss in some support to Lynn. And I have the article that appeared in the Boston Globe, and they're using the line, "This is Lynn time." And Lieutenant Governor Polito is going to be in Fall River later on this afternoon, and I'm going to see if I can get a couple of minutes with her. But you know, they talk about private industry, like a family that owns a Clock Tower Business Center, and which has been long vacant, and the Beacon Chevrolet property, the Clock Tower, all project development team projects. And the governor has put together a team just to do this. Hey, Governor Baker, how about Fall River? How about us? You're going to throw a lot of money into Lynn. How come us? But we figured out why. Because the governor lives next door to Lynn. He lives in Swampscott.
And Swampscott and Marblehead are two very, very affluent communities.
Correct.
The other thing is, Lynn is 10 minutes from Boston.
Yeah, actually, it's 15 minutes by T, according to this article. 15
minutes by T, but it's a 10-minute, it's
a 10-minute drive.
It's actually about a 10-minute drive if there's no traffic, but there's very rarely no traffic. But that's the reason that people like Neil Rossman and other people who make a lot of money live in Swampscott or Marblehead. Actually, he lived in both of those communities. I think he's back in Swampscott now. But they're very affluent communities. And again, the only thing that Fall River and New Bedford are the left and the right cheek if they ever give the state an enema. So, that's what they think about Fall River and New Bedford. And it's unfortunate, but, Lynn's a fairly depressed community, but not as depressed as Fall River and Lawrence, the two worst in the state. So why aren't they attempting to, maybe it's because they look at what we do down here.
Exactly.
And another issue too, what we do, and we'll get into that. But
yeah,
one of the fundamental reasons is, look, number one, the governor lives next door, and it's a real. It's like going from the Emerald City to.
Don't bring up the Emerald City.
Emerald
just
City,
yet.
I know. Like going from the Emerald City into the gates of Hades, when you go from Swampscott to Lynn, or from Marblehead to Lynn. I mean, it's like night and day. It's kind of like Iowa when you leave the major cities. As soon as you leave the outskirts of the city, you see nothing but corn and pig farms for like 100 miles before you see another human being. But that's kind of like what it is. But it doesn't surprise me that the governor is dumping money. This governor likes to dump money, and he likes to do things like the health care, the opiate, his fixation with opiates, a lot of money in that industry. And I haven't forgotten that the governor was in the health care business. So I guess he's still got a lot of friends there.
Yeah, I guess so.
So that's one of the reasons. Isn't it amazing how politicians, it's just like, we had a lot of wars when Dick Cheney was the vice president, and we sold a lot of weapons because he still had a lot of friends over at Halliburton. So now our governor used to be in the healthcare business, and now all of a sudden we're spending millions and millions of dollars on opiate addiction, because it's the good cause, but also because they're going to make a lot of money. And that's what we said on our first show so long ago. Follow the money. Let's move on.
We're going to move on because the State House is suggesting that they add a value-added charge Now, in Europe, that's called a value-added tax to property owners along the rail route. And this is now the new revenue source for South Coast Rail and the Green Line extension. Now, what's very interesting about this is they acknowledge that cities and towns are going to be very upset because that's their primary revenue stream. And we're going to take that money and put it in for South Coast Rail. So now, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Mayor-elect, and the current State House delegation, are you all for funding South Coast Rail on the taxpayers of Fall River? Because that's what your house is trying to do. And they're also going to share the losses with the cities and towns. You'll notice they don't say they're going to share the revenue.
They never share the profits. There's no such thing as profit sharing. There's only loss sharing and lower taxes on the residential. Wow, it seems like a theme we're going to be getting into very shortly about
right now.
let's screw the residential taxpayer. That's the new mantra, you know, and it's done on all levels of government. Let's screw the working people, and you know, let's protect the businesses, and and who cares that these businesses are failing because nobody has any money? We're just going to take all their money until we get our wish, and we're going to have a country of rich and poor and no one in between. There's very little middle class left, and they're doing their damnedest to eliminate what's left.
And while we're on taxes, let's talk about last night's city council meeting.
Oh, geez, let's not. No. Oh, please.
Unanimously, all 9, especially from Council Seat 2, which said I'm not going to vote, I'm going to abstain from votes because I don't want to influence the council, current or future, all voted to, again, give the residential taxpayer the shaft. They broke out that nice long pole and they put some barbs on it and they just shoved it. And it was the worst experience ever. It wasn't as bad as it could have been. No. They could have done a 1.0 tax factor, which would have given us a $17 and change.
And by the way,
rate.
the only reason they didn't do that is because we broke that story and it got out in the public beforehand, because I think they had a meeting at 4:30 yesterday
yes,
to confirm that they were going to go to the old, they were keeping the status quo. But, you know, when we talk about the status quo, see, this is the old, you know, bait and switch. They threaten to go to 17, they keep it, you know, they keep the tax factor where it is, and we're supposed to be happy. Well, we still haven't forgotten the fact that you lowered the business tax factor. So again, there's no shared sacrifice. And then we had the snake oil salesman march up to the podium again, and the sea parted, the water parted, the Taunton River parted, and Melian walked across from Somerset over into the city council chamber, and he gave his sermon from the Mount. He talked about how Fall River's a wonderful place to do business, and the tax factor's low, and we got to encourage business. Well, like I said, we have the second lowest amount of businesses in the Commonwealth of a city of our size. The only one with fewer businesses is Lawrence, which is the only city that's poorer than Fall River. So I guess, you know, figures don't lie, but liars can figure. So Rob Melian is getting paid well, by the way. I'm sure he makes an excess of $100,000 to be a shill. That's his job. And all he can do, because they can't bring in any businesses, they talk about it, but we don't see businesses because we can't sustain businesses in Fall River because nobody has any money. Businesses are sustained, as I've said a million times, by consumers. If you don't have customers, you can't run a business. That's why restaurants close. We can't keep major restaurants in here. We can't keep anything virtually except pizza joints and Chinese restaurants, and, you know, a few restaurants that cater to the senior citizens on with their blue plate specials. And I mean, you look at Fall River, and I said, you look at Taunton, which is a third of our size, and they have 3 times the amount of restaurants. Just drive down 44 or 140. But, you know, Melian doesn't care, you know? And what really irritates me is the way the council treats him like a god. It's like he's when he speaks, you know, he's like Merrill Lynch. Everybody listens, even though he's full of Merrill Lynch's. I guess their symbol is the bull, right? Because they're bullish, and he is really full of bull, a bull excrement, actually. So you know, but we hear this every year. He marches up and gives the speech how we got to keep businesses in the city by keeping their tax factor down. Well, our tax factor is lower than Newton's and Cambridge's, and Newton has 10,000. 10,000, as I said on the last program, more businesses than we do. Why? Because people have money. You know, our tax factor was basically the state average before. We've gone below the state average, supposedly to entice business. Can anybody tell me this great influx of business? Tell me about all the businesses that we've gotten. You know, and again, what disturbed me too is, you know, we go up there and we talk a lot. I chose not to go yesterday because, frankly, I said it before. But I hope the people out there are watching and paying attention, because not one person went up there and said, you know, why don't you give us a break and put the tax factor back to the state average?
But this is the problem.
And give some residential taxpayers a break. Not one person went up there and complained and reminded them, because now they think we forgot.
Exactly.
They think we've forgotten that they lowered the burden on businesses and shifted that burden over to the residential taxpayer.
And the problem is that, like you said, nobody showed up. Nobody opposed it. The only person that came out to speak is a man who's paid to speak for the business community. He did his job, okay? And business is business. Personal is personal. He did his job. And not one residential property owner came up and said, we're sick of it. This isn't fair. Why are you doing this? Why? Because you bought the line of bull from Melian that we have expansions of business all over Fall River. Matouk is expanded. Blount wants to expand. This one wants to expand. And in a few minutes, we're going to get into some of those companies and those names and where they're actually working. But when you don't come up and speak, okay, this is your fault. It's not my fault. It's not Chip's fault. It's your fault. You failed to speak. You could not take the time out of your day to go down to Government Center at 5:30 yesterday and tell the amazing nitwitted 9 that you matter and they work for you. And so when you don't speak, you can't complain. So when your tax bill goes up 55 cents now, and you're going to be paying about $130 more a year, which I'm sure you could find someplace to put in your home, remember, you didn't say anything. You failed to say a word. But I know that when I brought it up on the show, and Chip spoke about it on the show, right after we got off the air, we got phone calls telling us we were liars. And we had to go out and actually produce the memo, and we did, showing what the proposal was. And then they said, oh, no, I heard it from this one who heard it from that one. You know, I don't want to hear it from this one now. I want to see it. I want to know what it is.
And for the sake of accuracy, CJ, you actually spoke to the city assessor.
Yes, I did.
And he confirmed that that was the rate that they were considering.
Yes.
So let's, for the record, put that out, that the city assessor admitted it to you.
Yes,
and it was in writing, too.
Right.
So just so you know, that probably, you know, that would have come up for discussion at least, and maybe they figured they could have got somewhere in between, but we scared them off. But, you talked about Matouk and Blount.
Yep.
And I see Matouk is on our mayor-elect's advisory committee. George Matouk is on there. He's conspicuous on the economic development. Well, you know, when you look at Blount and Matuk, listen, I was there a few years ago when they were picketing Matuk. The guy makes $500 towels. I'm serious.
I know he does.
They're
I know.
$500
Yeah.
towels. I mean, he makes towels that, you know, he's got a business in Fall River because he gets treated like a god. He gets everything he wants. He gets tips. He gets all kinds of breaks. He can basically do anything he wants because, you know something? We don't have to, we're going to do anything for him to keep his minimum wage jobs because he doesn't pay a lot of money. He knows he can operate here, and as long as they can operate at a lower cost, they're going to be here. When they can't, they're going to be gone. Because you know something? One of his towels is about what some of these people in Fall River make for about 3 weeks' work. There's nobody in the, there's nobody that's making the household average of $33,000 a year in Fall River that can afford to buy towels from Matuk.
I know, and it gets worse because now that we're on the amazing advisory committee, also known by other words, what they call a transition team, from a mayor-elect who said, I am not going to have a transition team, hence why he called it an advisory committee. First, let's look at his first, excuse me, his first appointments. He is reappointing Kathy Ann Viveris as city administrator. He is keeping Attorney Joe Macy as corporate counsel, a part-time attorney. And now he is appointed, are you ready? Drum roll, please. Brrr, Faust Fiore as special assistant to the mayor. Now, wasn't that a position that many of the people in Fall River, including many members of the current city council, really didn't want to put forth? And they didn't want to, and actually, Jaisel even spoke about that position during his campaign. Yet Faust now has a position as the press secretary special assistant, and his first act, before he's even paid, as a special assistant, and I'm going to quote him, this mayor could make Fall River the Emerald City, and CJ would have something negative to say about it. Well, guess what? I'm off to see the wizard, the wonderful wizard of Fall River.
Yeah, well, I guess Mark Monroe Dion, and we have the column.
Yes.
He wrote quite a nice piece.
Yep.
And
I like his reference to him as the boy emperor.
well, I like his reference to the city's chief financial apologist, Kathy Ann
Viveris, yes.
That's what she is. And I guess that our mayor-elect doesn't have a problem with a part-time $92,000 attorney anymore. So but let's face the
And
fact.
let's remember that when you're the high school buddy of the mayor-elect, you get a job as chief of staff making $70,000 or $80,000 a year.
Okay, but let's say, okay, this is not a transition team, so the word is that this advisory committee is going to be in as long as he's in.
Correct.
This is not going to be something that once the transition is made, they evaporate into the wilderness. So this advisory committee is going to be his inner circle, but listen, I'm gonna go on record right now as saying, regardless of who's on this thing, it's irrelevant. As I said, he is the mayor. He will ultimately make the decisions. And as Mark Monroe Dion said in his article, this committee will tell him, study things, and then say, yeah, you were right, because that's what these committees do. The fact is that he is ultimately the mayor. We're going to have to judge him on what he does after he raises his hand and takes the oath of office. If there's a change in the city, if there's a change in the way we do business, we will commend him because that's what we wanted. If there's not, we will have to condemn him because, right now it's not looking really good because if you look at this advisory committee, it's, there are people here who have interests in that would conflict with some major changes in the city. I mean, I don't think that the president of the firefighters union and the individual police department, who I believe is involved in the union, may even be the superior officer's president, I'm not sure. I'm not going to go on, but I know he was involved at one time. They're not going to, you know, they have a job to do, and I understand that. But they, you know, they've negotiated contracts and stuff. They're not going to, you know, they're not going to advise him to make any major changes in their departments because, you know, they want to maintain the status quo. And that's what we don't need in the city of Fall River. We don't need the status quo. We need bold, we need bold and decisive changes to change the way this city is going. We need a realignment of priorities. We need the priority to become the taxpayer of the city of Fall River. We need every department to be looked at and all the fat cut out. We need to look at every conceivable way we can reduce costs. Then the next thing we have to do is ensure that the burden of sustaining this city and its services is shared by both parts of the equation, the citizens and the businesses. Because firefighters fight fires in businesses, police officers respond to businesses, and they avail themselves of the same services we do. So when we talk about shared sacrifice, there should be shared sacrifice. So I'm going to go on record as saying, look, this is bull. You can call it a transition committee, you can call it an advisory committee. Look, I don't believe in any of this stuff. The fact is, you get elected mayor, you sit down with every department head, you tell them to bring in a table of organization and his budget, and you go over it line by line and have them justify every position. If it's beyond your ability, if there's things, because they're unique, you get someone who has no interest anymore in it, and you bring them in to examine that department and advise you. Not someone who lives in, not someone who's working now or who has businesses that they're looking to protect, or union members who they're looking to protect. This is why in many cities, when they do promotional interviews, they have chief officers from outside the community do the interviews, because people from outside the community are going to look at the candidates, and sometimes they're not even given the names, they're just given numbers. And they make an interview, and they grade the interview based on what they know and with their experience and with their expertise. I'm not saying you have to go outside the community, but there are plenty of people who were involved in all of the departments in this city and have a very, very good working knowledge. And even if you have to get 2 or 3, one person for the basic service end of it, the administration end of it, the table of organization end of it, one for the collective bargaining part. You do what you got to do as mayor, but the bottom line is the buck stops there. Jaisal Correa is going to be sworn in as the mayor of the city of Fall River. This is not a good indication. I hope this is an aberration. But after he raises his hand and becomes the mayor, he assumes the responsibility of doing one of 2 things. Either changing the direction that this city goes by being a bold and decisive mayor who will do what it takes, and not in a 10-year, but do what it takes right now, which means cut the fat, cut the bullshit, and do what you got to do, or we're going to maintain the status quo. And if that's the case, I predict in 2 years there will be another election, and I think you may see another issue where we have, you know, the potential of having a 4th mayor in less than 2 or 3 years.
You know, Chip, it's sad that we've come to that. But, you know, when you look at the names of people on this list, you have to really laugh a little bit. You know, the co-chairs are Carl Garcia and Bob Canuel. Now, these are people who have vested interests in a lot of different things. Bob Canuel is the, you know, CEO, president of People Incorporated, a nonprofit. And with the pilot being discussed over the past year and a half, payment in lieu of taxes, his advice is going to be, let's not do that because the nonprofits can't afford it. Well, then I think we should go to billing directly the nonprofits for every service we provide them. Carl Garcia, how many people remember when Carl Garcia failed to pay for his license renewals? And he waited a period of time, and I guess it was found out, and he just wanted to pay the fee to get it back, because you have to reapply and go through the whole process again. Well, every city councilor and the mayor at that time said, oh, no, just pay the fee, and they brought it before the council, and they automatically reissued the license. So this shows you how the political influence plays out. You get into economic development, you know, you got Alan Macomber, George Matuk, Michael Farias, Michelle Pelletier, Matthew Pichette. These people are going to advise to cut the taxes on businesses, make sure that businesses don't pay anything, and put the burden on the residential taxpayer. The Education Committee, Jameson Souza. Jameson has a background in CD Rec, very knowledgeable individual. Tony Rigo. Pamela Liberté LeBeau, city councilor-elect. Now, question exists, will a conflict of interest occur? Well, we went through this with the sanitation, the solid waste task force, and we found out that they're advisory, hence the title. So there will be no conflict of interest. Okay? Edward Kostar, school committee member, a doctor. It's actually Dr. Ed Kostar. Very knowledgeable in education in Fall River and what goes on. And then, of course, George Jacome. That's a name we haven't seen in years, but again, another political insider.
That's a misprint. It's not J, it's a G, right?
It's
that's
J.
Odd George Jacome, the former mayoral candidate.
Yep. Then you've got Public Safety Committee.
Did he ever get his degree?
I don't know.
He's on the Education Committee.
Public Safety, got Jason Burns, Michael Hoare, probably the only two people on that committee which have any background in public safety. But again, they have to represent their membership. Linda Pereira, she has been an absolute failure on Public Safety Committee across her entire career. So we're going to put her on there. This obviously is what? This is a mending fences thing. Okay? Arts and Culture, John Brandt, Patrick Norton, Sandy Dennis, Jim Sewell, Steve Camara, all people that you really can't do much about. Organizational meeting, Dave Hebert, Holly Hill Baptista, Fred Franco, Aaron Tetrol, and Mike Mayoza. Mike Mayoza, Charter Commissioner. Get him on your committees. This way you can turn around and say, don't change that in the charter. And Mike's position on the charter is, hey, we're only going to go for a 5-year review. So we'll move that forward. Aaron Tetrol, look at his connections. Okay? We know his connections in the political world. We see how those people have definitive connections, and they have interests. And then, of course, the special committee, the Waterfront Development Committee. Peter Cabral, Gilbert Oliveira, a real estate person, Aaron Kudu. This one really went up my backside. This is a kid, has no economic background whatsoever. He's like a spoiled little rich kid, okay? His claim to fame is being on the 50-yard line at the NFL, at the Patriots game, and traveling the world. He runs Remy's quasi. It's a problem. Well, we're done.
We'll finish this on Friday. I told you we had a lot to talk about.
Yeah, we've got a lot to talk about.
And we haven't even got the coffee bill. But stay angry and read Mark Monroe Dion's article. It's a unique perspective.
Definitely is. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you Friday. Have a great day.